But as a kind of a precursor, you remember kind of where we left off?
Genesis.
For the fight.
How's that?
For the fight.
Before the fight,
Jacob eats Esau.
before the boxing ring, match happens. So Jacob and his brides have left Laban. They ran from them. Laban came. This is a really quick update or summary. Yep, thank you. They pursued him. They caught up to him. He was asking, "Why did you do this?" Really, what he was doing, he was coming after his idols that were stolen. Who stole the idols? Rachel. And then she does a very cunning thing to hide the idols. We won't cover again in class. But then after he doesn't find the idols, Jacob just lambasts him with all the stuff that he had done to him. He says, okay, kisses everybody, they do their thing, they bless everybody, and then they head out. Now he is moving on, and he is coming to meet Esau. And at this point in time, he has sent basically his family off, and he's by himself before he starts trekking up that way. And if you remember, he sent someone to go see where look up for Esau. What did he find? You remember? Yeah. So they met Esau. Esau gathered 400 men, and then starts heading their way. And now that scares Jacob. He's like, what in the world is going on here? Okay. So family's gone. He has this very interesting moment. Would somebody like to read, what was it, 31? 32.
32.
There's 32. 32, 22 through 32. So would somebody like to read that for me?
Well, I'll do it.
Okay.
The same night he rose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day is broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose up with him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh.
Okay. When you're reading this section, if there aren't a ton of questions that pop up in your head, you're not reading it. Because there are a lot of things in here. There are a lot of things in here that people have a real struggle with. And so one of the things that we'll just start right off by saying is where the biggest issue that people have is who is he wrestling with? Okay, that's the biggest issue that I came across. And I read probably 5 or 6 commentaries. And it really kind of, I already knew this, but I am going to reiterate this to you guys. Not all commentary are ones that we ought to be reading as you're reading them, okay? Because I read one, and I was kind of doing this on purpose because I wanted to get a view of what everybody. One of them said that they just couldn't believe who it was, so it had to have been Esau that he was wrestling with.
No.
I'm telling you this up front, that you, as you're studying scripture, that you have to be careful what you're reading. And the minute you come across something, you better test it with the word. And if it get rid of it. There have been many commentaries and many people that I've read in the past that have come up with something, and now I get rid of it. Now, I know that 100% of everything is not going to be probably 100% correct. But if someone comes out blatantly and says something like this was Esau that he was wrestling with, I'm out. Okay, so this is just a lesson that as you're studying, be very careful. Not all commentaries are made the same. Okay? So with that being said, what questions do you have about this?
Who is it?
Really? You're gonna stop? Well, I mean, it's a good question. We'll just start there because it does kind of help. Go
Did
with
they
this.
physically wrestle?
Did they? So that's a question.
That's a question.
Yeah.
It could be
So-
God, could be Jesus, could be an angel, could be a man. Those are the kind of the first possibilities.
It seems
So it's
dreamlike.
like-
I was saying, it seems dreamlike.
Right, so is it his consciousness that he's wrestling with?
No, and what y'all, all of the things that y'all are saying is what everybody has been struggling with.
Can't be his conscience because he got his hip.
Something
Was it
physical.
physical?
Was it
Physical.
WWA or college wrestling?
I don't know, I wake up in the morning after sleeping and I'm hurt in places, so.
Yeah. And some people will say this was more of a spiritual wrestling match than it was a physical wrestling match.
Right.
He limped.
Yeah, he limping. And cannot be-
That's a hard
I'm just
thing.
telling you what's being said. I am going to go through here and tell you what I believe it is, and why. But let me tell you, there were some verses in here that I struggled with a little bit as I'm reading this. And it's funny to me, I've read this many times, it never hit me. And I was like, wait a minute, this verse kind of messes me up a little bit. So how does it work? So one, here's what I'll say. It's God. The question is, what form? That's the question. Because we know it was God, because Jacob says, I've seen God face to face.
Hosea 12 says it was God.
Hosea 12 says it was God.
And it's like, Faniel means like face. Faniel, like, it's like face of God.
Yeah. Here's another idea of who it could have been, and I'm not saying this is what some people believe. They say it was a pagan god, a local deity who was at the river to try to keep him from coming in. Be careful with this one. He said he saw God face to face. He wouldn't say that if it was a deity of a little g god. Okay?
It's interesting in Judges 13 that the same thing happens, in that they ask him what his name is,
Mhm.
and he does not give his name, but they know that they have seen God. The parents of Samson.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and all of these are little keys for us to determine who this is. Yeah. So let's kind of walk through this. Can you see God the Father and live? What does Scripture say?
Not face to face.
Use Scripture to help go through and dissect these things, so we know it cannot be God the Father at this moment. Okay. So if it's not God the Father, then it either has to be the Holy Spirit or it has to be a form of Jesus. Right? Okay. Where have we ever seen Holy Spirit act in this kind of manner?
No.
We do not see any revelation of the Holy Spirit acting like or having this responsibility or doing this. That is not his job. So by deductive reasoning, we're going to get to Jesus. Okay? This is a Christophany. This is Jesus coming to him. The verse I had a problem with, and I say problem, here's the thing. When you come across a verse that doesn't make sense, the thing you need to understand is it does make sense. You just need to figure out how. Because God's word is never contradicts itself. It is never wrong. So where is my thinking and how do we figure out how this is done? Does that make sense? Okay. The verse that I had a problem with was, let me see it here. Oh, he says, when the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of his socket. How in the world could Jesus, being God, not be able to beat Jacob?
And how old is Jacob?
100.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of a minute.
So when I read that, when it hit me, I mean, it just like flew off the page. I was like, okay, wait a minute. How does God not beat a man?
They must have let him. Must have allowed him to do it.
Okay.
I think
You
it's
just wanted to see how
connected.
long he would take it, maybe?
I think it's
What's your
connected to his
persistence?
name change.
How's that?
He wasn't going to defeat the stubborn side of Jacob. He needed to break him a different way.
Yeah. It's because of that verse that people think that it was more of a spiritual match than it was a physical match.
Ultimate though, maybe.
However, when you take the word wrestling, it was physical. Okay, this was not a just an overarching, hey, this is an allegory of something that was taking place or something. This was a physical wrestling match that he was doing. So if that was the case, then how does this work? Here's how I came. Did you want to say that?
Well, I was gonna say, that in Hosea indicates that the reason that Jacob prevailed was because he repented in the middle of the whole thing.
That's interesting. So here's something that as I was going through, when we think about Jesus, if this is Jesus, Jesus has two natures, does he not?
Human and divine.
He is man and he's divine. Jacob, there's no way he could overcome the divine nature of Jesus. So was this the man Jesus?
Or it could be
I don't know. I'm saying, now, they're one and the same. People have a problem with that and because he hasn't been born yet. I get that.
Yeah, but John 1:1 though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the beginning was the Word.
He has always
sometimes when
been.
you go to the stores like Walmart, I mean, kids will throw a fit. Parents are stronger, but yet, I mean, they have a hard time wrestling with them and keep them like, the car, put them in the cart and negotiate with them, like, just to buy some toys or whatever. That's the same thing happening here on a bigger scale with the grown-up baby here.
Good image.
Okay, I'll buy you a piece of candy.
I mean, like,
Again, in Hosea, it says that as he wrestled with him, that Jacob began to weep and seek his favor.
Absolutely.
He's begging like anything, like, he's scared about his life. Jesus had the same moment in Gethsemane, right? I mean, take this thing out of me, if it's your will.
Now, I'm not saying that was the answer. I'm trying to sit here and go with it because I really have. How does he win against God?
Well, don't you think if he realized while he was in the middle of the wrestling match that he was wrestling with God, he would stop. It's almost like there's a series of events that occur, and he maybe realizes in hindsight, after he's touched in the hip, that who he's dealt with has let him prevail was God. But he didn't know that at the beginning. I don't think anybody would wrestle with God if he.
Well, there definitely was a change, kind of what Dr. Reagan was saying, because right after that, he would not let him go until he blessed him. So there was an act that he kind of came to and understood who it was. So I do think that it was somewhat mental stubbornness, that kind of a thing that Jacob was wrestling with God. And Jesus was like, come on, dude, get your act together. And then he's like, let me show you who I am. And he's like, oh, snap. Literally.
So you need Jesus socketed too.
Ooh, wow. You were just waiting for that one, weren't you? But this is a big moment. And we don't rush past this because this is a big moment in Jacob's life.
But could it be a physical Jesus?
Oh, absolutely. It could be.
I think it has to.
He has shown himself physical in other places. Would you not agree or no? I mean, it's a huge debate within theologians.
Well, could there also be kind of an amazing recognition of what his level of responsibility was going to be along with the name change? And this was a way to really call him to attention and say, okay, you're getting ready to do something here. This is very important. And he was named Israel, and he realized he had a different set
Nature
of
about it.
responsibilities from that point.
Yeah. All right, Mike, so what are you thinking? Tell me. We're here to talk about it, so.
It depends on how you describe the physical nature of the person with whom he wrestled. Jesus appeared, but he did not appear as Jesus. He appeared as
The angel of the Lord.
angel of the Lord.
Well, that's how they described him.
Yeah.
But here it's like Elohim, he's really, he's very clear. He didn't say angel.
But he
Where
didn't
does
say
it say Elohim? Does it say a man?
For I've seen Elohim face to face.
Yeah, he says, I have seen Elohim.
But before that, when he's just wrestling with him, it's the Lord is a man, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
But it changes.
One of the forms of Elohim is Christ.
So first off, he goes, he's wrestling with a man. So it has to be a physicalness to this guy, whoever this is. Would you not agree? Once he then realizes who it is, he changes his whole demeanor and says, Elohim, this is God I'm wrestling with now. So if,
What is the translation for angel in Hosea? Because in Hosea it says, he struggled with the angel and overcame him.
Malak. That's the original Hebrew word. It's
So
used
is this an
in Hosea.
incarnation like we were seeing with the situation with Lot? Where you're having, it's an angel, it is of God. He could be saying, I've seen the presence of God, because angels are godly beings, is that versus a Jesus incarnation? Because it's very clear that it's an angel of God.
But that's in a different point in
I
time.
believe in an angel and the angel of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a
Yes,
different,
there is,
that's a
yeah.
different witness, that's a
But he's
different
not
person.
saying the angel in Hosea, he's saying an angel.
Jacob calls him a man, so if you say what somebody else called him, that could be looking all the circumstances and putting it together, so you gotta be careful. He calls him a man.
yeah. So, see,
Christ appears as an angel of God. Usually he will let the people know, remove your sandals because the place you're standing is holy. But in this case, there's nothing like that. In all the other circumstances in Bible, you can see that. Maybe Jacob is without any sandals, yeah.
so,
He was,
well, let me ask it. Do angels have the ability to bless?
no.
Only God.
So there are some clues in there that kind of lean me towards it being God. But our minds, we cannot fully understand and comprehend all the aspects of God. Okay, we in our minds, because Jesus hasn't been born, we think that he can't be physical, but could he if he wanted to? So I'm not going to rule it out, but I've got to be very careful with that. Could God make himself physical in some kind of manner, in other ways? So, but I know what I come to find, this is God he's wrestling with. Because he even says it's God. Now, he does use the word Elohim, not Yahweh, which then throws a whole different, screw into this thing. But I do believe that it was God. And the other reason I believe it was God, to this point, who changes names? God does. God alone.
Well, Jesus changes Peter's name.
Absolutely. And that was a connection that I made earlier to go, holy smoke. Jesus, by changing Peter's name, was making a call back to all these things that God has the authority to do, and he was telling him who he was at that moment.
So in Genesis 1:1, it is in the beginning God, Elohim, created the heavens.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this goes back to the whole theme of Jesus being a mediator between God and man. In Job chapter 9, he says, I need a mediator. And then he says, I know at some point I'm going to see him with my own eyes. And then he does later in Job 34 or whatever it is, and says, wow, now I have seen him. So I think this is what's happening here. I do think it's a Christophany.
Yeah.
We also have Jesus in the upper room who appeared out of nowhere, and there he was, and then he said to Thomas, put your
Touch me.
hands in my.
Yeah, but he'd been born at that point and so forth, but he was still spiritual versus physical.
And he can reveal himself.
Yeah. So, like I said, a lot of questions.
What chapter in Hosea are they referring to?
I want to say it was 12.
12. Thank you.
Remember, we think of time as linear, which is a whole different
Yeah,
perception.
yeah, and be careful to put God in a box. So I try to be careful with that. But let's move on because we're not going to answer this question. Okay. What we need to look at though is Jacob and the reasoning by this wrestle. What was going on? Why were they wrestling?
He just left Laban, he's about to meet Esau, and he's talked to God, he put the pillow, so I think he's still got some internal strife going on.
Yeah,
Jacob's character is a good question.
absolutely.
He was usurper. And so, for God to be able to use him to do what he wanted to accomplish, Jacob had to have a woodshed experience, if you will.
Absolutely.
You had to have a come to Jesus moment. So,
Literally.
yeah.
Which I don't want that one if I have to get to that point. You know, absolutely. He was doing all of that. So, one, he came to him because this was the point when Jacob kind of became an end to himself. This is when this humbling aspect, because before you go meet your brother, you need to be humbled a little bit here. You need to realize who you are in me. Let me show you who I am. So he's revealing himself to Jacob. But then he's also doing another thing, I think. He's also, because what was the Jacob like in the very beginning when he ran? You remember? Compare the two Jacobs.
He was a scoundrel.
He was a scoundrel. He was timid. He wasn't a field worker. He probably was a little scrawny.
Deceiver.
Yeah, he had all these little things, but now look at him. He's a little different. Now he's wrestling with God. You know, he's a little more bold in his action.
You have a lot of saints that have a problem with humility. I mean, Moses, had a problem with it. He's the humblest man of all.
Yeah.
And Peter had a problem with humility. And so it's kind of that. Maybe he had that kind of
Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But in his attitude right before this moment, he was fearful to meet Esau. And I think God was also revealing to him, let me show you just a little how strong your character is. Don't be afraid, because through this whole ordeal, I've been working in you. So he's maybe showing a little bit of himself, but he's also trying to humble him. And then he touched his hip, and then, now he is physically ill as he's approaching Esau. So now he can't do anything physically, and he has to rely on God when he meets him.
Perhaps the length of the wrestling match is a greater indication of Jacob's stubbornness as opposed to God's inability to overcome him.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe God is saying, don't let this happen again. You got to deal with your own attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. This was all about him coming to, like I said, to an end to himself, becoming a little character of God, relying on God, because moving forward, this is what he was going to need. Because he was moving into an area where he was going to need God more than ever. And not anything that he did. He needed his character to change. And whenever he held on to God and said, I'm not letting you go until you bless me, showed a character change in him.
I'm really glad to see that the Lord sees fit to give other men of God a limb.
And a patriarch there, bud. Nice.
I just thought it struck me when you just said, so, in our Christian walk, is that not the same way? Because, I don't know, maybe this is where you're going, but the thing about it is that you hear these, I just detest this word, deconstruct,
Yeah, be careful with
that.
that.
You just never knew God, but they want to formalize it some other word as somehow you knew him and then you didn't. It's like, I've said before, it's like people see Christianity as like Walmart, go buy something at Walmart, but I can return it, and it's just not the way it works, but here, that's just the same God we serve, is that he wants us permanently, we make that commitment, it's a permanent thing, and this is what he was trying to get out of Jacob. There's no wavering anymore, it's this way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly, because I had that put on here, because this isn't just a story about him. This is a story about all believers in what we go through. Because before we come to Jesus, now, even afterwards, don't get me wrong on this one, we were living 100% for ourselves. We have to go through this struggling match to come to know Jesus, and then try to put an end to our ways, so that way we can walk with him. So in essence, this is a story of coming up to a new faith, to a new way of life, kind of a deal. So this picture is so much bigger than just Jacob. This is a picture of Israel, the nation, for what's going to happen, but then also for unbelievers and people who come to know Jesus later on. What an amazing thing this is. The layers beyond layers, that these stories have. Only God could have done this.
Don't you think it had an influence on others too, like his family, when they saw him limping and probably noticed a difference in his demeanor?
Yeah.
And Also, Esau may have been touched by this when he saw his brother he hadn't seen for so long. Here he was, an old man limping. You know, it might have touched his heartstring in his heart.
Yeah.
So,
No, absolutely. I mean, God was definitely working in the entire situation, and we'll see that here in just a minute. What are the chances of us winning if by us fighting God?
Well, if he wants to let us,
Less
so
than
he
zero.
can teach us a lesson.
Zero. We have no chance of winning with God when we wrestle with him.
But he did. He did in a way. He did, because God led him. It says in there, when he knew that he was going to. So,
And that's, yeah, and so, but he didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, but no. Jacob thought he was winning. The struggle was going on, but he's like, let me now show you.
Yeah, but he got injured, and that was the lesson. It was probably a better father.
But ultimately, did he win though?
No.
You will never win with God. Never. But in our minds, we think it's better when we take things on our own. Or, I like this way better. Or whatever the case may be in our lives. You know, so what a good lesson for us to take away from it.
Sometimes we have to go through this road of so much more that we wouldn't have had to go through if we would have just done it his way the first time.
Yeah.
Me and Jonah.
Yeah, right?
So on this whole concept of wrestling with God and like, why was Jacob winning, or why did Jacob thought he won? I was just thinking that God doesn't force his will on anybody. So maybe, so when I think of this wrestling match, I'm thinking more of it as I'm wrestling with the subject, like I've got this problem, so that I think of it more of a conversation or a dialogue. We're wrestling with this topic, and Jacob thinks he's winning, and God's not gonna just force his will on him. And he says, okay, let me show you who I am. Boom. Direct revelation of like, oh yes, I need to be humble. Yeah.
I believe you're who you say you are.
Well, and I think that's part of what it was whenever he said that he was winning, is God will allow us to continue in our ways. And we think that we're doing right, even when it's not. And then he has to come in, and he doesn't say he has to, but he will come in and say, let me, you know what?
Course correct.
Yeah, let me fix you a little bit. Hopefully it's a little lighter than a hip replacement kind of a deal. Okay?
He told Moses, you're not gonna get to see the promised land. I told you not to yell at these people, you know, and he did. And he told Peter, 2 seconds after he recognized who he was, he told him, get thee behind me, Satan. So in a lot of, at no place is anyone, humble enough and smart enough and godly enough that God can't teach him something.
Absolutely. Well, in John 15:5, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, I in him. He bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. Nothing.
But burn.
Well,
You can't even be fruitful
you
in
don't
that.
choose me, but I chose you and appointed you. So he's the one who's in charge.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the last thing I want to cover is this name change.
Israel.
This is big. This is the nation of Israel has been born.
Yep, before me.
I mean, the kids have been born, but now it becomes Israel. Why is that significant? What's up with that? What does Israel even mean?
It's a people.
He who strives with God.
Yeah, there's multiple meanings of this. He who strives with God. But there's other ones that said that he was like Prince of God. I mean, it's kind of weird how you take those names, but I think it's all of that. It's, because he takes him from Jacob, heel catcher, to Israel. God prevails, God preserves, God's prince, God's word. But I've also read where it's he who struggles with God. So it's interesting. I tried nailing it down a little bit more, but I couldn't quite get there.
Israel means he who struggles with God? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
It's one of the nuances, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's prevail, like, you prevail.
Anybody, he prevailed. So that's why they get the God prevails, or, he prevails, God's prince. So anyway, anything else in here before we move on? It was a big section.
So, on verse 29, Jacob asks, please tell me your name. Any significance in there?
Is there what? I'm sorry?
Is there any significance in that request, or was it granted? Did he tell you?
He did not tell him.
Or probably is not recorded.
Yeah, it's possible, but I really, at this point, I don't think he told him. I think that's not for you to know right now. That's not what's important at this moment in time. Because that's how I took it. Doesn't mean that's the way it is. But everyone's that I read says that God just refused to answer that question at this point in time.
He told only to Moses.
Only Moses. He does reveal his name later. This wasn't the time.
When he says, "I have seen God face to face," what word does he use for God?
Elohim.
So going back to Hosea chapter 12.
12.
It seems to say that his name was there. Let me see. Hosea chapter 12. His name is the Lord. Does it?
The law? Lord? Oh, Lord. Yeah.
Something
His
like
name is Yahweh.
It's Yahweh. You know, but he doesn't tell him that. Because what's important at this time is his name change. Okay? So he can then move forward.
He doesn't reveal his name until in Exodus when he does so with Moses at the burning bush.
That's exactly right. So it wasn't time in the way that I read that and why he didn't do that. All right, let's get into 33. To me, this was very interesting. Let me just read this first kind of section. Then Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servant wives. He put the servant wives and the children at the front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed down to the ground 7 times before him. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. We're going to pause for a second. This whole ordeal, how he set up his family, you got to question the dude. Okay, so if anything, what this shows me, he's still man. He still has faults, okay, flaws within his character. Why did he set them up? Because he put the servants up here, he put Leah and her children here, and he put Rachel and them way back here, and this is how they were going to approach Esau.
He staged the whole thing. Reverse.
What did that say about his faith?
It's a way of telling his family who his favorites were.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine how the servants and Leah and her kids felt during this ordeal? I'm like, are you kidding me? There's 400 men out there. What do you think's gonna happen?
You guys go first.
You can't skip over that section, man. Oh, but you know what it does say. We all know that his love for Rachel was more than anything else, and this is just another sign to show that his love for her was beyond everything else. He was willing to sacrifice everyone else except Rachel.
You notice he mentions Joseph is the only kid he mentions.
He mentions not the other ones.
Yeah, we're about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but anyway, he was basically sacrificing the least important to the greatest importance to him.
Do you think he was surprised that Esau met him with such joy?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm like, what?
Kind of reminds me of the prodigal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Story when he comes home.
You know, and this whole
Father runs to him.
yeah, and Esau's behavior is amazing here. I mean, what do you think Jacob? I mean, what was Jacob thinking was going to happen?
He's gonna get slaughtered.
Oh yeah, it's going to go to war. This is not going to be good. He said he was going to kill me last time I saw him.
Right.
He has 400 men out here. What was the point of that? You know, nowhere in here does it say they were armed, that they were an army. It's just like they were just said they were men. So, you know, and really, if you kind of think about it, Esau that was never even part of his mindset. What a lot of people believe is he was coming to show him almost like his family.
They were the greedy committee.
It's who he was now, because he was ousted, and now he has acclaimed a group. Now I don't.
Entourage.
Yeah, it is. It's his entourage. I don't know if that's the case, but that seems to be, as you read the story, I don't think it was ever Esau's intention was to kill him. I do believe that God was working on Esau this entire time while they were separate from one another, and God was softening his heart. And then he sees Jacob, and he probably had a little, his heart when he saw him limping and coming in, that probably also was just the nail that broke it. And he was like, oh my gosh, just runs out to him and then just wants to hug and make restitution. What an amazing story there. So Esau had apparently forgiven his brother, which is something we all should be kind of keeping the forefronts of our minds. But then also we're going to let's read on here after that in verse 5. Then Esau looked at the women and the children and asked, who are these people with you? These are the children God has graciously given to me, your servant, Jacob replied. Then the servant wives came forward with their children and bowed before him. Next came Leah with her children and bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed before him. Quite a big different story than what was prophesied in the past. Who was going to be bowing? Who was over the other one? Very interesting kind of what's going on here. That doesn't change the fact of what was prophesied back in the day. But Jacob's attitude now is showing he's almost having this I feel bad for what I did kind of moment. And he's almost saying I'm sorry. He doesn't quite say it, but he says it in different ways. And I thought somebody said something. 8. And what are all the flocks and herds I met as I came? Esau asked. Jacob replied, they are a gift, my lord, to ensure your friendship. My brother, I have plenty, Esau answered. Keep what you have for yourself. But Jacob insisted, no, if I have found favor with you, please accept this gift from me, and what a relief to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the face of God. Please take this gift I have brought you, for God has been very gracious to me. I have more than enough. And because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gift. Now, it's believed, like back in the day, the custom was anytime you offered something to somebody, the first time you automatically deny it. It's customary. And then when they offer it again, then you accept it at that point. Is that the case? I don't know in this section, but it kind of seems that way. But either way, God blessed both of them. And now Jacob is trying to make restitution with Esau by giving him things. And some people think this was what he would have received as an inheritance had he been blessed by their father. Okay, so almost kind of like repaying him for what was due him that he stole. I don't know that, but I think he was definitely buying him off. Okay. Then in 12, he goes, well, Esau said, let's be going. I will lead the way. But Jacob replied, you can see, my lord, that some of the children are very young, and the flocks and the herds have their young too. If they are driven too hard, even for one day, all the animals could die. Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant. We will follow slowly at a pace that is comfortable for the livestock and the children. I will meet you in Seir. All right, Esau said, but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you. Jacob responded, that's not necessary. It's enough that you've received me warmly, my lord. So Esau turned around and started back to Seir the same day. Jacob, on the other hand, traveled on to Succoth, where he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was named Sukkoth, which means shelters. Later, having traveled all the way from Padan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the town of Shechem in the land of Canaan. There he set up camp outside the town. Jacob bought the plot of land where he camped from the family of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver, and there he built an altar and named it El Elohe Israel. Any thoughts or questions in that little section there?
What's the meaning of El?
The mighty God is the God of Israel. Highest God of Israel, if you want to kind of bring it down. It really kind of shows also the character of Jacob, where he's at. It's funny because Jacob does tell his brother, he goes, I'll meet you in Seir. But he had no intentions of going there. He went another direction right now. Some were like saying, well, that's another deception of Jacob's to do this. It's like, no, shut up. Okay, God told him to go somewhere. He was going to go where God told him to go. We don't know later on if he went up to see his brother in Seir. He could have done that. Okay, so I just think Jacob was on course to go where God told him to go. Okay? Anything else in here? Okay. That's 33. I mean, I expected 33 to go pretty quick. But it is funny to kind of compare the two brothers and kind of their attitude in approaching. Jacob bowed before his brother 7 times, referred to himself as Esau's servant twice, referred to Esau as Lord 4 times, gifted his brother a huge gift to appease him. Compare seeing Esau's face as being like seeing God's face.
He is so relieved that his head is not chopped off. You know? I mean, like, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected. You know, I can't imagine that realization.
I mean, he was approaching kind of in fear and went through this whole thing with fear. Here's Esau. Yeah, he did approach with 400 men, but he ran to meet Jacob. He embraced Jacob, fell on his neck, kissed him, tried to give back all the gifts that he offered. You know, he offered to accompany him. He offered his own men to protect him. He dressed him as my brother. I mean, what a contrast. So he was coming with hope and joy of meeting his brother. The other one was coming in fear. Kind of a deal.
And thankful the women and children in the wagon are still alive.
Everybody's still good. Yeah.
From the wagon.
So anyway, all right, let's get to 34 because this is a very unfortunate event, which sets the stage up for some things in the future. Okay. Would somebody like to read? Let's read 1 through 10. Would somebody like to read that one?
I can't. Oh, go ahead.
Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and violated her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with his livestock, so he kept quiet about it until they came home. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob. Now Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were filled with grief and fury, because Shechem had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor said to them, "My son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it."
Stop right there. This is a very interesting chapter because first off, God's name is not mentioned at all in this chapter. Okay, and rightly so, because this has nothing to do with God. We see some characters of Jacob's children come into play here in this chapter. They don't fall far from the tree. Okay. What we do see though is we see Jacob being a little more on the passive side, probably too passive, and allowing his kids to do what they do. So this does kind of show a leadership issue that Jacob was having, that he didn't kind of come to get his kids in alignment. Okay, so we have Dinah. It's the only daughter mentioned of Jacob. And what happens to her? She gets raped. She was 15 at this time. What's interesting is that roughly 15. She is of marrying age, though. Now, we could sit here, it's a horrible event, but we have to look at what Dinah was doing. She left the family, and she went to the world to see what the other women were doing. So she left her clan to go over here to see what was going on. Okay, I'm not trying to make excuses for what happened, but her, by going off to see and wanting to see part of the world, it put her in a situation that helped this to occur. Okay. What was funny to me is we've said this throughout Scripture, as we've read through Genesis. It's the sight that always trips us up. She saw something that she wanted to go check out, and it wasn't good. Okay. Eve saw something she did that would look good. It wasn't good. We see that over and over again. Just because something looks good does not mean it's good, and it's going to end good.
I mean, curiosity versus temptation. I mean, I'm the kid who normally like, hey, what's that over there? I'm gonna go explore stuff, but I never would have assumed it was a temptation of Satan.
Well, there's a thing about curiosity, but then there's a thing about acting on that curiosity and doing things that you shouldn't be doing she should have had her brothers with her or some kind of people along with her doing things and stuff to, whatever the case may be. Okay, we're not privy to that happening, we just see her leaving. So she's put in the situation, and then Shechem comes in, very delightful, and takes her and rapes her. What's interesting though is after this moment, man, he said he falls in love with her at this point, and now he wants to marry her at this moment. So his dad comes on board, and he's like, "Oh, okay, we need to rectify this situation here. So we're going to go to Jacob, and we're going to tell him you love him. We're going to relay all this. We're going to give him gifts." And we're going to try to get this marriage taken care of. And so, because the thing is, if somebody is not a virgin, the likelihood of them getting married goes way down, because they've sinned. They're defiled at that point. So this was not a good thing for Jacob, and her brothers too. So they get a little hot. Okay. So they were out in the field, Shechem, and they come. Hamor comes over, and they start talking to Jacob. Jacob tries to keep his mouth shut because he probably knows what his kids are like, and he doesn't want to say anything to them. But they come in and they overhear this, and then the rage starts coming in. Okay, so let's continue this. Where do we leave off? 10, 11. So somebody want to read 12 on? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, finish the chapter for me.
And Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I aim to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me, only give me the girl as my wife." Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will give our consent to you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters to ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go." Their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man, who was the most honored of all his father's household, lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to their fellow townsmen. "These men are friendly toward us," they said. "Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men will consent to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised, as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all their other animals become ours? So let us give our consent to them, and they will settle among us." All the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?"
All because of lust.
What questions do you have on this? Or thoughts? History repeats itself?
Even read October 7th, that's where, Israel acted like some group were outraged, some group were like self-passive, like what they did.
Yeah.
Example of the sins of the father being visited upon the children. They're just deceitful like him.
Absolutely.
I thought it was interesting that Jacob didn't ask God how to handle the situation.
Yeah, he didn't go to God in this that we're aware of. Absolutely.
An interesting thing is like Shechem, like he's a son of, but yet the place name is like Shechem in his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, wow.
So it shows you
The guy's popular there.
It's prevalent at that time. It was just awful.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is both of the cultures did not agree with rape. I mean, so they had some morals, but not. It's like, we'll draw the line on the moral here.
I think it's interesting that so many of these men from this older culture are like, yeah, we'll do that. I mean,
Just go along
I
with it.
mean-
Let's,
Agreed, they wanted all
The comfort.
oh yeah,
I mean, it
they
was
were
like,
the wealth.
they want the wealth, the comfort.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. You have to put yourself in their position, knowing who Jacob was, what he had. He had a lot. He was wealthy as all get out. And they saw this as an opportunity to gain wealth for themselves.
And maybe a little scared that he would retaliate. You know, that's
Possible. That, you know, anything was possible. But in their mindset, though, I do think they were looking only at the gain. Oh, this is going to be good for us, because we get their women, and then when we get married, he's going to bless us with all that stuff. So we're going to get rich from this. This is a good opportunity for us. So let's go along with this. Oh, and by the way, you said that they were really nice people. Yeah, they turned out really nice, didn't they?
I assume Shechem wasn't married before, or he didn't have any other
He hadn't been
wives.
at this point he wasn't. Yeah. But you know, the father was a very good salesperson, and he was like saying, "Look, we can all just intermarry. We'll all have a good old time. We'll all be blessed from this whole ordeal. So let's just all like get in a circle and sing kumbaya with one another." You know, and the intermarrying thing was a no-no. Jacob and his kids, they all knew this. You do not intermarry at this point. So that wasn't even an option for them. What I find interesting in this whole chapter, Jacob doesn't even stand up to anything until after the event. Question is, did he know? You know, why, you know, what was going on in his mind, and what was he privy to and not privy to?
Is it the first one?
So which two kids plotted this plan? Levi and Simeon. So what's interesting to me, what happens here helps us understand what takes place in chapter 49 of Genesis. Jacob does not forget this moment, because in 49 he starts blessing his kids. He does not bless those two.
But God changed that.
He did. But Jacob, this is all on Jacob and why their names aren't mentioned now. But they are given, this is very interesting to me. So Simeon, like the kids are given land, right? And when we get further along in the area, Simeon is given a small plot of land surrounded by Judah. And it's almost like Jacob was going, you're going to be watched by your brother. And the powerful one, by the way. And Levi, what did they get? No land.
Just cities.
God is there.
You know what's also interesting? The primary role of the Levites were to butcher and sacrifice animals. They had armed guards at the temple. This was a bloody job. Kind of similar to what they went through, what they did. Okay? They would relieve no land as an allotment in territory. Instead, they would be scattered throughout the 12 tribes. So, very interesting. So you got to kind of pay attention and connect these events to things that will happen at some point in the future, and we'll do our best as we go along. Simeon was given a small piece of territory, and that at some point they were actually absorbed into Judah's tribe. So their end kind of does come. They're at least they're allotted land. Ugly event. Don't take matters into your own hands. Revenge is not an option. Okay? So we just don't do it. Even when we're harmed, even when we're, thing. Jesus said we are not to do that. That's not our job.
They were tricky like their father.
Yeah. They deceived him. So, like I said, the character of them did not fall far from the tree on that one. Okay?
Why there's no mention of Dinah in the rest of the Bible, or what happened to their tribe? Are they considered Jewish?
Dinah's?
Yeah.
I don't know. Can't answer that one. I would say not, because not part of the 12.
Yeah, right.
But, and it's not the pure blood at this moment. But even the pure blood later gets messed up, though. So we'll get into that one later. Okay? Anything else in that chapter that we need to cover?
Well, yeah, but I mean,
What questions do you have, Doug?
Not questions, just there's a lot that.
Yeah, and so also keep this in mind. At this moment, they go and start collecting all the rest of the goods. They get the women, they get all the items that are in there. What's included in all these items are idols. So they start bringing in all the customs of this other clan and bringing them to the house of Jacob. That plays a part into what's coming next. So they were gathering everything. They were probably gathering things they shouldn't have had.
And Jacob doesn't destroy them, he hides them.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Quit jumping ahead of me. I'm just kidding.
It seemed like the first fall of Israel.
The first fall, it was definitely a big issue. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's read a little bit then of 35.
Can I ask this?
Absolutely.
So in 30, when it says, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you brought trouble on me by making me stink, the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. He goes on. It just seems to me that there's just this total integration between the Canaanites and the Jews. I mean, the idea that the land is owned by the Jews or owned by the Philistines or whatever, it's a total confusing mess. So, am I wrong about that? Do they maintain it as time goes on, or they bring it back, or it becomes just the Jews, or is this kind of intermarriage problem something that's permanent? I think so.
No, I don't know. What I do know is at this moment in time, they did break a covenant. And that was big to Jacob, and that's kind of why we saw and hear him say what he said about this. The bloodline thing is a very interesting, because right now, you ask a Jew, most of them don't even know what their tribes are in the bloodline, and they're all mixed in right now. So I don't think that's such a big issue at this moment anymore. But I could be wrong. But they're going to come home. So however that look, and they're starting to. We've had big events, and we're going to get a little bit into that into chapter 35.
So they kill.
They kill Shechem and
Shechem
and his dad. They kill all the men.
All the people just got circumcised and everything. Yep.
Well, that was the plan. They waited 3 days because that was like the height of the pain. They weren't able to fight. Made it real easy. The guys were brilliant war people, but wasn't good. Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so in this chapter, roughly 10 years kind of have passed. Okay? So we have to remember time is like gone all along. We also need to remember the vow that Jacob made to God in chapter 28, 20 and 22. Somebody pull chapter 28 up real quick.
What verse?
20 through 22. 28, 20 through 22.
Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. This stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and all that you give me, I will give you a tenth.
So at this moment, he made that vow saying, I'm going to return to my father's house. He has not done that yet. God is about to remind him of that vow. Basically, remind him, but tell him of the vow. Okay? So that's kind of the setting of what's going on. Verse 1. We'll probably only get through 15 here. So then God said to Jacob, get ready and move to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob told everyone in his household, get rid of all your pagan idols, purify yourselves, and put on clean clothing. We are now going to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who answered my prayers when I was in distress. He has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the pagan idols and earrings, and he buried them under the great tree near Shechem. As they set out, a terror from God spread over the people in all of the towns of that area, so no one attacked Jacob's family. We'll stop there, because there's so much right here. So we have God coming to Jacob and saying, okay, Jake, now's the time. I need you to go back to Bethel. Go back to your homeland. This isn't an option. This is what you're going to do. And some believe that he had been in prayer this whole time, like asking God, seeking God. He's been in distress because of, maybe everything that's going on with his family, with his sons, and this whole ordeal, making the nations mad. I'm sure that's still probably part of it because he broke the covenant. So, and then God then finally speaks up to him.
Well, why do you look at it as, so you're almost saying it's like it's a condemnation or, it's disciplining, but it also could be a great blessing, okay?
Oh no, this is fulfillment.
Okay.
This is how I read it. Okay? Because there's more to come, because you're going to go to this land, because this is where I need you to be. So then we're going to do so much more here. Kind of a deal.
When the covenant that Jacob broke was what?
That he did not return to his land. Yeah, I'd say this. He just hasn't fulfilled it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So then he goes to his household, and the first thing he says, you need to get rid of your idols.
Why did he allow him in the first place?
And what is all this about? I mean, did God say that? That we're told? So why would he do that?
Assumes that that's what God wanted to do.
Because he had a broken hip. That's kind of a joke. But maybe he had to be careful with God, and this was a way to recognize the true God, not the God of the Canaanites.
Well, if your friends are visiting your home, you clean your home. Your neighbors are not gonna ask that. Your friends are not gonna ask that. But you do it out of respect.
Yeah.
Is that here?
Yeah.
Seems like several times they go back, he ends up going back to Bethel. That's where he started.
Yeah.
Now they're coming down this.
Sometimes we kind of lose track of our first experience with the Lord. We need to go back to Bethel, where it started. Do some thinking about what we committed to and what we did. And I think that happens in his life a
Yeah.
couple of times, where he goes back to Bethel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think Jacob knew where he was headed. He was headed back to God's land, and he needed to cleanse the house. He was getting ready, because it wasn't just the idols. You got to get rid of your jewelry, and it's not the fact that jewelry was an issue. It's the fact that what was on the jewelry. A lot of times they wore jewelry that had pagan symbols on it, or that it was dedicated to the pagan gods. He said you need to get rid of all that. Then you need to cleanse your clothing.
You get rid of permanently?
Permanently.
Okay, so it wasn't like we're just gonna put it here and then when it's all over we can come back and get it.
Yeah. Now, he buried it. He didn't destroy them. He told them to go put them under this tree. Some versions it might say oak. Some of them will say maybe a little something different. But they were to go and they were to bury everything. You are not to take this with us when we go here. You are to leave it behind.
Kids, put your video game systems, your phone, everything.
Whatever idol that you have.
Learned it from his mom, right?
Right?
Didn't the mom do the same?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just don't understand why you didn't take the sting before.
Beforehand. Well, at that he was kind of passive. So then I started thinking about this as like, it's very important for us to cleanse our own selves. We need to get rid of our own idols and things that we have in our lives that we put before God when we come to Him. And we tend to think idols are these just statues of God, of other things, or whatever the case may be. And we've said it in class many times. It's anything you put before God. If it has a higher standing than God, it is an idol. Too many church people need to set their politics aside because that is their God. That is more important to them. Okay? Sometimes it's your spouse. Sometimes it's your kids. Sometimes it's sports.
More often it's money.
Money. That was going to be one of my last ones. Power, prestige, those kind of things. And then I started thinking, well, what jewelry and everything do we have? These are all pagan symbols today. Some of them seem pretty harmless. But these are all pagan symbols from around the world. Pagan.
Some of those things are right here. You see some of these when we walk in the neighborhood.
Bumper stickers.
Like, well, that's just a dream catcher. That's to a pagan god. Okay, well, how about yin and yang? We're all equal. No, pagan.
That one's not pagan.
Which one?
One of the symbol of the Trinity.
Well, that goes to a Celt.
No,
that big one right there.
This one, that actually, there's a Celt. It goes back to Celtic. What I was reading about it, because I thought that was a Trinity thing.
Symbol of the Trinity.
So Okay, I'll delete that one. Because what I read was it was a Celtic god.
But the Celtic were Druids.
But they have their own gods.
They had a
So you got to be careful with some of their Celtic
Yeah.
symbols.
Is it a triangle thing with the eyeball thing? Isn't something like that on the dollar bill?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Mhm.
That's the Masonic.
Well, see, these.
Masonic symbol.
Money, well,
Masonic.
yeah.
Well, James Avery's got one on pendant, the cross-looking thing in the bottom, yeah.
Well, James Avery, the bottom one is a little bit longer, so it looks like a cross. So, but you got to be careful.
I mean, the goat for sure.
The one,
Actually,
well,
that
the crescent
goat,
moon and the little
it's an
star
inverted
look so
pentagon.
benign.
It's
I
his-
mean, like,
it's Islam.
Crescent, the
Yeah.
star of Bethlehem.
Just watch the,
Yeah.
a weird.
So anyway, I was like, I didn't like having this on my computer, so I was just like, yeah, there's a ton of them. So people wear these things all the time. Okay, hey, let's come back around.
Bring it back.
Hey, I want to try to get through this. So it's important that we just don't accept the world and the symbols that they come across. They have meaning behind them. Things are attached to them. There are little g gods in this world. They are called demons. And you need to understand that is a real thing. So what things that they were worshiping at this time, they were worshiping demons at this point. And that's still happening today. There is a demonic force going on in this country, going across this world, and it is truly demonic. It's so much so that it is out in the open more than it's ever been.
Can I share something? I work for McKinney School District. We just deployed teacher laptops, and on it is the new Microsoft Outlook, which you can customize with your colors. And there were 10 circles of colors. The first row was like blue, red, green, pink, whatever. The second row, when you highlighted it, said non-binary, homosexual. These are colors to put on your Microsoft Outlook to show, and then it went on, all the deviants of sexual choices
Funny that they're joined by.
on Microsoft Outlook.
So, and I'm going to throw a couple things there, and I might ruffle some feathers here. The first one that hit me a couple weeks ago was Justin Timberlake has a new song out. I saw the video, somebody sent it to me. Demonic.
I have no idea.
Completely demonic.
And he's claiming to be a Christian.
It shocked me. Taylor Swift's new album,
Oh, bad.
he bashes Christianity in her lyrics. Just because they say something does not mean that that's who they are. So we need to be very careful what we're listening to, what we're watching, because we will elevate them way beyond where that we shouldn't even be elevating them. So be careful. It's out there. Okay?
You
Just
know a tree by its fruit.
you absolutely you
If you
will.
watch the award shows,
Okay.
some of these performances,
Oh.
there is some huge imagery, demonic
That's
imagery.
true in
being
all areas of
used.
music.
That is. Even you got to be careful with Christian music.
One of the godly songs you could think of was one that was Frank Sinatra's, I Did It My Way.
I Did It My Way.
When Robert and I led a youth group, seniors and juniors and stuff, we would pick out songs and just go through and say, it's a catchy little tune.
Do you know what you're
I like
singing?
the catchy little tune, but do you even know what you're singing? Do you
Yeah.
know what they're saying? Do you know what these mean? And
Yeah.
most of them were like, wow, we didn't even realize that,
Ben Campbell was one of my favorite singers, but his song, Rhinestone Cowboy, he says in it, I'm willing to walk over anyone to get to the top.
That was before he was, I think it was before he was a Christian though.
So what I'm saying is even Christian music, you need to be careful.
And a lot of it is interpretation. I mean, comics say that, look, it's a joke. I mean, that's not the way I believe. It's just a joke. It's meant to gain popularity or views or customers. And so when you write songs, it's not necessarily just, I'm not defending Justin Timberlake. I haven't heard his song, but I mean, if he's maybe he's just somebody who believes that way, not him. So interpretation, but it's still out there. I mean, whether it's
By him allowing it in his music video,
It can
he has
be
now
right.
just accepted it.
it can be misinterpreted.
So that's like me putting an upside down cross in my house going, I don't believe it, but I'm going to keep it there.
Yeah.
Or one of those pagan symbols here. You just don't do it. You don't even go in that realm. Ever. Okay? It's that serious. And let me tell you, he is crafty, and sometimes you don't even know it's there.
That's why God's Christ.
You can also twist a very fine symbol, like the rainbow.
Yeah.
I think it's time we claim that sucker back.
Well, theirs is a six color
Yeah,
rainbow.
yeah, now that they're changing it, yeah.
It's seven.
So we're gonna stop there today, okay? Lots of stuff in here, but I want to try to bring in some things, you know, that we can, well, that's for next time, that we can apply to ourselves, because we're not just here for knowledge. We're here to apply this, what we're learning, okay? And so that's kind of why I wanted to at least get something like that. Prayer requests,